Today I'm talking to the Disney hack about Disney World and Disneyland. That's episode 50 of the Go Inform podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. So great to have you here with me today. This is episode 50, you guys. I'm super excited. I'm your hostess Maven here on the show, and today I have a special guest. The Disney hack, my buddy Joey, is going to join me, and we are going to have a conversation about Disney World versus Disneyland. This is a question we get a lot. What are the differences, and, where's the best place to stay? So I thought it would be fun to invite Joey onto the show and just kind of have a conversation about that. So you'll hear us chatting here in just a minute. Couple of reminders. One, you can find the show notes for this episode at goinform.net/50. Secondly, probably should be first, thanks you guys for being my audience for 50 episodes. This is really awesome, and I'm so glad to have hit this milestone. One more thing to tell you is that Joey and I also recorded another episode for his show, which should be coming out right about the same time as this one. So over on the Disney Hack podcast, we're talking about the impact on the Disney theme parks related to the COVID-19 virus and all the park closures and advice for what to do if your trip is derailed because of that. So be sure to check that one out. You can find Joey's show, and wherever you're listening to me right now, you can find his show too. And again, it's called the Disney Hack. So without further ado, here is me and Joey. All right, everybody. Well, I'm here with my friend Joey. He's the Disney hack. And a lot of you might not know this, but Joey is actually the person who gave me my start in podcasting. Way back a few years ago, Joey had me on his show before I even had a podcast. So I really recommend that you check out the Disney Hack episodes 12 and 19, because you'll hear me before there was even a Go Inform podcast.
Wow, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, so thanks, Joey, because this is episode 50. So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm so excited to be here. This is awesome.
So, Joey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do over at the Disney Hack?
Well, let's see. I'll try and shorten it down a little bit for you. So I am a former cast member and Southern California native. I grew up going to Disneyland all the time. And as a kid, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be Walt Disney. And when I got to be an adult, I realized just how nearly impossible that is and how amazing and what a genius he really is. So I decided to go to work at Disneyland. Being a cast member there was one of the best times of my entire life. I was there for a year. In fact, I was just talking on Facebook. I was there over 20 years ago, 1997 and 1998. And I was talking on Facebook this evening with a friend of mine who I worked with there, who still works at Disneyland. And I was talking to him about some of the, when we worked there, we worked graveyard custodial. So there wasn't anybody in the park. And so I asked him, hey, are you going down there since you still work there and walking around with nobody there? And he's like, I kind of did that. Remember when we worked together and we'd walk around in the middle of the night, 4 a.m, and there wasn't anybody there? And we have all these memories. And so I just always loved going to the Disney parks. I always loved Disney. I loved the movies. I wanted to be an Imagineer after I decided that I was never going to make it as a filmmaker, then realized I had to learn engineering and that wasn't going to happen. And I decided to become an entrepreneur. That's really where my heart for Disney has kind of led me. And about 3 years ago, I did all this research on a trip it was our second trip to Disney World, and I wanted to just make sure it was perfect. We'd been once before, so I kind of got the lay of the land. You go once to get beat up, right? And to get squished by the crowds and melted by the heat, to destroyed by the prices. And I knew enough based on all of the times I'd gone to Disney. I was at Disneyland. I was the consummate tour guide for my friends and my family, and so going to Disney World for the second time in 2017. I kind of took all this knowledge from Disneyland. I took the experience from our 2014 trip, and I made this touring plan. And I was there with a family of 8. My brother-in-law's family came, and I said, guys, look, just trust me. And they did. And when we were done, they were like, we're never going to Disneyland or Disney World without you ever again. And so it changed my life. But so really what's interesting, and let me tell you, because I said I was going to make it short and succinct, and I'm not doing that. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts in 2016 and 2017. Like every podcast ever recorded about trips to Disney World, I listened to over the course of about 18 months planning for this trip. And because I found it was really easy to learn what I needed to know while I was mowing the lawn or walking the dog or driving in the car. And I could do that without having to sit at a computer and research this stuff and take notes and put it in spreadsheets. I was at Disney World. We're actually riding the monorail from the TTC over to Epcot to go to Epcot for the day. And we were going around Spaceship Earth. And I heard a whisper in my ear, like, I'm no kidding. Like, how people talk about the still small voice. And I heard the words, the Disney hack. And before the monorail even pulled into the station, I had pulled my phone out. I had gone online. I had discovered that nobody owned thedisneyhack.com. I bought the domain off GoDaddy. I'm not kidding you. I spent the $11.99 or whatever, bought the domain on GoDaddy, and then the train pulled into the station, and we got off the train, and I turned to my wife and said, I'm going to start a Disney podcast when we get home. And she goes, it's about time. So I did. It took me a couple months, but I got it up and running. I didn't know how to. I had been podcasting since 2015, but I honestly didn't do any of the technical stuff. I just showed up, and a friend of mine did all the hard stuff, and I just recorded. And so I had to teach myself how to do how do you record, how do you edit, how do you publish. I had to learn all that stuff, which you obviously taught yourself, right? So it's not that hard. It's not that easy, but it's not that hard. And what the Disney hack it's this lifetime of love, of going and maximizing the fun and the time and saving money. Because gosh, I just don't like spending a whole lot of money on vacation. I want to just squeeze everything I can, but I'm not made of money. So I love teaching people these tips and these tricks. And so I created this thing called the Disney hack. And there's a website and there's a Facebook page and there's, a podcast. It's not as active as I'd love for it to be. And I'd like to get it back stronger. And maybe now that COVID has completely decimated most people's schedules, I have a little bit more time in mind that will allow me to do that. But I just, I'll tell you what, the best thing that's ever happened is you, Maven, and the fact that I met you on, I don't remember where I met you. I think I met you in one of the groups, and we just, we just had this passion and love for travel to Disney parks, and you're a Disney hacker and a universal hacker and a tour hacker and a travel hacker. And I just thought, there was some synchronization there, and it was, and I loved your blog, and it was so deep and resourceful for what people need to know in such a compact way that I brought you on the show, and we've just been friends ever since. And that's my story.
Wow, that's a great story. Thanks for the shout out there.
Absolutely. I'm not in it to make money, and I'm not in it for the fame. Just like you, it's, I try not to even use put my personal life into it, although it does seep in there. I try to just, it's really about what people can get out of it. And I think you're the same way when it comes to what you share. And so, for the value that I think we get is when other people, get some benefit from all the work that we're doing and everything that we're doing. So yeah, it's really special that you're doing what you're doing. You had the blog long before I had the podcast, but the fact that you decided that you were going to take on podcasting as well, because I think it's such a great educational resource. So, and I love being here. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. And yes, I love podcasts too. And when I started the blog, podcast was definitely something on my mind. So getting to try it out over on your show was really great. So anyway, okay, now that we've done all the Mutual Admiration Society. So, and it is really, this is a passion project for me too, and definitely helping other people have great vacations is so important. And I hate it when people have bad vacations. And I have had bad vacations too. Everybody has. And anything I can do to make your vacation nicer is, I feel great about. But there is one other big thing that comes out of making these podcasts, and that is that we get to talk and think about our favorite things, and that is the parks. And so today, I have to say we're being a little selfish because really Joey and I just wanted to talk about Disney because we're stuck in our house, and my trip got canceled last month, and it's just time to get some Disney going. So that is what we are going to do today. We're going to talk about both Disney World and Disneyland because this is one of the top questions. I bet you get it too, Joey, is, well, why should I go to Disney World? I am just going to go to Disneyland, or the other way around. Like, what's the difference? What do I need to know? And is there a difference? So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I knew you would bring insights, having been to both places and with your history at Disneyland too. So let's jump in and talk about Disney World and Disneyland.
Awesome.
Okay,
where do you want to start?
Well, I was thinking that probably the logical place to start is the location, because that's obviously like kind of a big difference. Disneyland, you've got on the West Coast, you got Disney World on the East Coast. But besides that, the locations of these parks, and there's a lot of differences. Disney World was placed to be almost its own city, and Disneyland is in the middle of a city. So, I mean, how do you think that changes it?
It definitely changes it when you're thinking about planning for a trip, right? Because I have recently sat with some friends of ours from our church who couldn't decide on which one to go to, and we got to talking about accommodations where they were going to stay. And they were really set. They're younger. They're in their 20s, and they were really set on staying at a VRBO or a HomeAway, some kind of Airbnb kind of concept. And I was like, when it comes to doing that, it's great, and I love that your generation's all about that. But transportation to and from, if you're going to go spend several days there, you kind of want to stay on site. And the VRBO or Airbnb concept is not really conducive to doing that in either place. And so they were really kind of shocked by that. They had no idea. Of course, they live in Texas. Neither of them have ever been to either California or Florida. So they had no idea of the complexity that comes with the location. And they're very dynamic and unique. As you know, when you go to Disneyland, you can stay at a Best Western across the street. You can have great accommodations at a very low price, very close in proximity to Disneyland. You go to Florida, you're not staying at the Best Western, but you could stay at Art of Animation, right? And so it's a different kind of economic advantage to staying there as opposed to staying maybe at the Grand Floridian. But even if you're on property, you're still looking at potentially an hour from hotel to park, depending on what kind of transportation mode that you take.
Yeah. I knew this conversation was kind of all mixed up together, all the topics, because location, like, it plays into so many of the things, because it's the location of the park, like where is it in the country? It's the location of where you're going to stay compared to the park, even the location of the parks compared to each other on the property is different. So that kind of gets to the size of what we're talking about here. So Disneyland is a lot smaller than Disney World. And this is like something, I have this graphic on my website that's gone on Pinterest like thousands of times. And it's this graphic about how big Disney World is. And I just called it, Disney World is not a giant Disneyland.
It's not. It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's a world. Because the thing is, at Disneyland, what you have is you have the Disneyland park, which is the iconic park that when someone thinks of a Disney park, that's what they're thinking of, with the castle and all that. And then you have a second park, which is California Adventure, that is literally across the street. Like,
yeah.
walk out of one and 5 minutes later you're in the other one.
Not even 5 minutes if there's no,
that's if you have to wait at the gate.
Imagine where you live. If you live on a street where there's a house across the street from you, and I mean, it's a little bit further walk than that. It's like walking into their backyard, but it's not that far away. I mean, it's really
right. So the size there is the scale of it is is something that if you've grown up going to Disneyland and now you're imagining what Disney World is like, I think a lot of people think Disney World is just take Disneyland and make it huge, just like the castle must be giant and everything's really spread out and it's one park and it's got all this stuff in it. And it's not like that. Disney World has 4 parks. It has 2 water parks. It has 30 hotels. Golf courses. I could go on and on about how many things there are at Disney World compared to at Disneyland. And so the location really plays into it because Disney World, they bought that property specifically to make it the Disney bubble. And when you're at Disneyland, as soon as you walk out of the gates, you're out on a big busy street in the middle of a big city.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you cross the street at Disneyland and you're actually at an IHOP, right? Whereas at Disney World, if you want to get to an IHOP, it's, an Uber drive or 3 buses away. I mean, it's, it's not close. It's a 25-minute drive minimum, probably, from any given point at Disney World. So yeah, in terms of size, it's just, it's Disney World. When I try to explain it to people, I tell them that Disneyland, all of Disneyland, including California Adventure, Disney Springs, and even the Disneyland Hotel, Downtown Disney at Disneyland, all of it would fit in the Epcot parking lot, right?
Right, that's right.
All of it. And people, if they would have to have been to Disneyland to even know, the comparison. But even if you hadn't been to either, that sounds pretty impressive. And you talk about the 4 parks and the 2 water parks and the 30 resorts. Nobody really has any concept of what that means until you actually go there. I mean, I've tried to do to take a day off and to tour the resorts. I get to 3 of them, maybe 4, and I'm exhausted because they're just so spread out and there's so much walking to do, and it just takes forever. We went and rode the Skyliner from Epcot all the way down to Art of Animation and Pop Century, and it took an hour and a half and all we did was sit on gondolas right all the way down there and all the way back. It's just so far. There's so much to do. It was fun, but it's just nobody really takes the size into consideration until they've actually been there. And it's something to consider.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a plus and it's a minus. Depending on how much time you have for your trip, I think is a big factor in which destination you would want to choose. Because things are really spread out at Disney World. There's more to see. There's way more to see there. So you need more time. Where at Disneyland, it's more compact and there's still tons to see and do and tons of reasons to go to Disneyland. But especially if you only have, a long weekend or, maybe 4 days or something like that, Disneyland is way more doable in a short time.
Absolutely. And when you talk about size, there's actually more to do attraction-wise at Disneyland than there is at Walt Disney World. Maybe not now that they've gotten, Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway and a couple other things that have opened up. I haven't looked recently, but they're very comparable when you do the 4 parks versus the 2 parks in terms of attractions. And if that's something that is attractive to you, when you're thinking of going to a theme park, then going to Disneyland, you're going to see a lot more with a lot less walking, and that could be really desirable to some people who maybe are not all that into walking around or not able to walk around as much, right? If you've got some kind of handicap or you need to use some kind of assistance to get around, that size can really be a benefit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, some of the parks are awfully big down there in Disney World.
Yes.
You could do a lot of walking. Yeah. In Animal Kingdom.
A lot of walking.
Yeah. Now, another thing about the locations that's important to keep in mind is the weather, because the weather in Southern California is going to be a lot more consistent year round than Florida's weather. Well, Florida's weather is consistently hot, rainy, and humid for a lot of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But if you like 72 degrees and sunny, Southern California is probably your place.
Yeah, it's hard to find a bad day in Anaheim.
Yeah. Yeah, I have, though. A couple years ago, we were there, and it was a torrential downpour. So
but
it
that's
does
kind of
happen.
nice, too, because it clears out the parks, right? People
It
go
did.
home.
Like, the locals all left. They didn't know what to do.
Yeah, they didn't want to be out there in it. All they got to do is wait a day or two or three, and it'll be sunny again. So that's when they'll come back.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, so again, going back to it all comes down to this location, because the thing is that at Disneyland, because it's located in the city, and I mean, okay, Disney World's in Orlando's not a small town, but Los Angeles, big city around there, and Disneyland is like, it's like for most people might take their kids to the zoo on a regular basis in their hometown. In LA, they go to Disneyland. So you're going to have you have so many annual pass holders there compared to Disney World, which is, it's kind of flipped. So Disneyland, you're going to have like, more annual pass holders on a given day in the park than tourists, like travelers. Where in Disney World, it's the other way around. There's not as many locals that are coming to the parks. It's definitely more people who have come to specifically to go there. They're staying on site or staying nearby, and this is their big vacation. When you're at Disneyland, you've got a lot of local people who are just there for the day or even just part of the day.
Yeah. They might even just come in to eat, right?
Yeah.
And ride one ride and then leave. I used to be a Disneyland annual pass holder when I lived in Southern California. I had a job where I lived in San Diego. I delivered lost luggage for the airlines, for several of the airlines in San Diego. And sometimes people would fly in to San Diego because it was cheaper than flying into John Wayne or LAX. And they would have a family member or take a, transportation somehow and get home to Orange County. And if my route took me to Orange County in the afternoon, instead of turning around and getting back on the I-5 and heading back down to San Diego in rush hour traffic, I'd go to Disneyland for a couple hours and I'd get something to eat. I'd go ride Space Mountain. I'd people watch, and then I'd go home around 8 o'clock at night without having to worry about, the traffic. So I know a lot of people did that too. And so it's not unusual.
Yeah, and I have heard too with the new Rise of the Resistance attraction at Disneyland that they've had some issues with it's a little more challenging getting a boarding group there because you've got these annual pass holders that are going into the park at 8 o'clock when you're able to try to get a boarding pass, and they'll try to get a pass, and then if they can't get one, or if they get it for like late in the day, they'll just leave.
Yeah.
So they'll just literally come in the gate just to get a boarding group to ride Rise of the Resistance, and if they don't, then they'll just leave. So it's a really weird dynamic down there, a lot different than what you see. If you're going to Hollywood Studios for the day, you're still going to stay there, even if you didn't get a boarding group.
Right. It's just too much effort to leave and go anywhere else. I mean, you might go over to Epcot for the morning if your boarding group is like boarding group 96 or something, but you're not going to be going far.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing I noticed with these locals in the park last time I was there is that it's just a little bit different than being in the park with a lot of tourists. For one thing, those local pass holders, they understand the etiquette. They understand how the queues work. They understand, not filming the entire ride with like a flash camera.
Right. Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at you. And the other thing is that like when I'm in the parks, I'm usually in my like park gear, so I've like basically like look like I'm ready for a workout, and this is not the way that these annual pass holders come to the park. I mean, you'll see ladies with heels on, you'll see full makeup, like really dressed up. People like are coming there, like you said, after work or on a date, and stuff like that. It's a lot different. When you're in Florida, everybody's on vacation and it's usually hot too. So they're all like totally casual.
Yeah, Hawaiian shirts and shorts, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm taking my own pictures here and this lady next to me looks like a model, It's just it's a different crowd.
She's just there to get her unicorn frappuccino and take a picture of it in front of the castle, and then she's going to leave.
Yeah, for her Instagram, I think.
Yeah.
So, so definitely the crowd is different. Like we already kind of touched on it, the accommodations are different too. Disneyland only has 3 Disney-owned hotels, where Disney World has about 30. And the Disneyland hotels are all going to be a pretty high price point, probably because there's only 3 of them.
Yes.
Where at Disney World, you've got price points all the way from a Best Western comparable sort of room rate all the way up to, a really high end price and lots in between. So Disneyland, though, they're, like you said, literally are Best Westerns across the street and a whole bunch of places you can stay and be walking distance from the parks.
Yeah, and you were talking about the Disneyland owned property hotels, how expensive they could be. And you go and spend $800 a night to stay at the Disneyland hotel, and it doesn't even come with breakfast, but you go across the street to the Best Western where you're spending $99 a night, and it comes with this amazing breakfast spread that's complimentary, and it's really interesting. But I will tell you that we stayed both at the Best Western and at the Grand Californian on this last trip. And there is a difference, even though you're not getting breakfast at the Grand Californian for free. The feeling of being there, the ability to walk out of my room and walk right into California Adventure, there's a difference. Somehow, you just feel it. It's hard to quantify, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, and that's the way that you can have that Disney bubble when you're at Disneyland, where that's what Disney World's all about, is if you can stay on site, then you're getting that Disney experience all day and all night. It's harder to do it at Disneyland because you really do need to stay in one of those hotels. But that sounds like you had a really cool stay.
It was a great trip. I will tell you this. We went to Disneyland on it was like our third morning, and my wife we had planned to put on shirts to go in and get specific pictures. We wanted to do it early in the morning, so the light was just right and the crowds were down. So she got all dressed up. We grabbed her Starbucks at downtown Disney. We headed into the parks. We took pictures, and she just turned to me and said, "I'm going back to the hotel room because it's the Grand Californian, and I am not going to not spend time enjoying this hotel room." And she left, and we didn't see her for like 3 or 4 hours.
Oh my gosh, that was probably so great for her.
She loved it. Put on the bathrobes, went and sat on the balcony overlooking California Adventure. Yeah, she loved it.
Yeah, that sounds really great. That's awesome. Yeah, so how about if we talk a little bit about the parks and the attractions that you're going to find in California versus Florida? Maybe we could start by talking about what is the same. Well, okay, what I'll say is that there are a lot of the same rides in both places, but they're not actually exactly the same. Mm-mm. So what stands out to you of a ride that you've done both in Florida and in California that you've noticed some differences?
So many. And, I don't know about you, and I'm curious to find out what you think about this. I'm just going to throw this out there so you can beat me up if you disagree. But I find that the attractions that are similar are better at Disneyland more often than not than they are at Disney World. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like the Florida parks, even though I live really far from them, I live closer to Disneyland, but that feels like my home parks. But honestly, there are some of the rides at Disneyland, for sure, they're better than at Disney World.
Well, it doesn't even have to be the ride itself. Like take Small World, for example. The full experience of walking up on that building and
Hmm.
and then going to the one at the Magic Kingdom and walking up on it, you'd almost miss it if you didn't know it was there, right? It's the differences are so striking, at least in terms of the facade. The ride itself is relatively the same. In fact, the ride at Disney World has Disney characters in it now, which people were fighting initially, but I have come to really to love and appreciate. Now, a lot of people will say that the Jungle Cruise is better in Florida. What do you think of that?
I don't know. I don't do the Jungle Cruise as much as some of the other rides, so I'm not sure if I could say if it's different. But one thing I can say about the Jungle Cruise that has to be different is the landscaping, because Disneyland has been there for so long that the landscaping in that particular park is established to the point where it really is like a jungle.
It really is. The stories I could tell you about the Jungle Cruise and working on it at night when there's nobody there and having possums crawl out of the jungle and crawl onto your boat. Yeah, I'll digress for now. That's a whole nother episode for some other time. But yeah, it is a jungle back there. Now, Florida, it's actually tropical. So, I mean, it has the potential to become very jungle-like. And it's 50 years old now. So,
Oh my gosh, you're right.
yeah.
Yeah, so definitely some of the rides are different. Specifically, without spoiling it, I would say the Pirates of the Caribbean. Definitely, there's a surprise in there if you're used to the Florida version.
Yeah. Yeah. I was surprised at the Florida one, having gone on the one in California so many times. I'd been prepared for it because people had told me what to expect, but yeah, it's you kind of have to take it for what it is. It's different. I'm looking forward to going on the one in Shanghai. That's really different, but yeah, we're not talking about that park this time.
Yeah, I know, but if that one opens up first, maybe we should go down over there.
Sounds good to me. Now there are some rides at Disneyland they don't have at Disney World and vice versa. What are some of the rides at Disneyland that you just love that you could never find at Disney World?
Okay, I just can't believe that this is one of my favorite rides that you find it's at California Adventure, that I never thought would be my favorite ride, but the Guardians of the Galaxy ride is so fun.
It is a lot of fun.
And the Tower of Terror is one of my least favorite things. Like, it's for me, the Tower of Terror is so scary. But for whatever, I think it's just the entire theming of it and the way it operates. The Guardians of the Galaxy version is so fun that it's like when I think about going to Disneyland, it's like one of the first things I want to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Not Toy Story Mania or Cars Land or anything like that. It's Guardians of the Galaxy. That's great.
Yeah. How about you?
I love Guardians as well, although it really beat me up the last time I rode it. So people our age, and sorry, I hate to lump you in with me.
Yeah, it's okay.
It starts to become a little less fun every year, but I agree. And I'm a huge Marvel fan, so I'm so excited about the Marvel campus that's coming in a couple of. I guess it's coming. It's supposed to come later this year, but we'll see. It might be pushed back to 2021. But yeah, I'm so excited about that. And so as far as like attractions in California that you can't get in Florida, gosh, there's just so many. I mean, Alice in Wonderland is a classic original park ride that you can't get over there in Florida. The Indiana Jones ride, although you get a version of that in Florida, it is so not as good as the one that they have in California. I mean, I don't want to take too much away from Dinosaur. In its own right, it has been a good attraction, but at the same time, it nowhere compares to the fun and immersive effect of the Indiana Jones adventure.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think what you touched on something else too about Disneyland is the nostalgia, because Disneyland still has some of those old original rides like Alice in Wonderland and the Toad's Wild Ride and some of those things that you don't see in the Magic Kingdom. And those are the rides that Walt really touched, and so there's definitely a nostalgia that if you're a Disney geek like us, it really touches you when you walk down Main Street in Disneyland.
Absolutely. What about Florida? I mean, we've got so many more. You've got Animal Kingdom, which is so different, and Epcot, which is so different. Whereas Hollywood Studios, you could almost take any attraction out of Hollywood Studios and put it into California Adventure or Disneyland. What are some of your favorites that you got in Florida that you can't find in California?
Well, one thing that you cannot find in California is the World Showcase in Epcot.
Yes.
I mean, if I was going to Florida for the day, that's probably where I would go because it's such a unique experience and you get so many cool things to see, do, and eat and drink in like one day. It's a really neat concept for a park, and they've done, of course, Disney, they've done a great job of keeping it relevant, keeping it interesting, and really making you feel like you're in the place.
Yeah. I mean, it's like taking a trip around the world.
Yeah.
You know, for the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the food, it really is. And with the festivals, they've really created this opportunity for you to go and eat a level deeper where you really do get to taste your way or drink your way around the world, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I will say, though, that last time I was there was in December, and so it was the holiday time, and Epcot was the one park that there were a lot of locals in. So I think that they get a special pass that they can go after 6 p.m. into the park for Epcot. And at the holidays, it's probably a big tradition for a lot of local people in Orlando to go over to Epcot and see there's all kinds of extra things that are happening. So when I was walking around there the first night I got there, I thought, this feels a lot like Disneyland.
Yeah, Epcot could get very busy, very packed with people dining. I'm amazed at how, I know you have dining on here. And you're talking about the locals coming into Epcot in the evening. It's so interesting to me how when I hear people talk either on podcasts or in the Facebook groups or wherever they happen to be about how it's, when you're a kid, it's all about Expedition Everest and Space Mountain, right? Well, when you get to be an adult, it's about World Showcase. It's really about this. They want to stay at the boardwalk. They want to be walking distance from 11 different types of artisanal beers that, represent different countries around the world, and all the booths that serve, meatballs and tapas. And it just amazes me that becomes sort of the adult version of what a theme park is. It's really about this experiential opportunity to just throw a bunch of money at food and alcohol.
Well, I know. I mean, it's kind of like it's basically Las Vegas except a Disney version.
Without the gambling.
Yeah, because you can go to Las Vegas and have some incredible food and entertainment and all of that, and not even do any of the gambling. But it's not the same vibe as walking around the World Showcase in Epcot.
Right.
It's just it's low key. It's, and I know people who aren't theme park people probably think I'm crazy saying a theme park's low key. But if you do it right and you listen to us, it will be. And, but you get to have world-class dining, and that's definitely something I think that's different from Disneyland. The Disneyland, the two parks there do have some unique dining options, but compared to what you can experience in Disney World, it's just night and day.
Yeah, it really is.
So I mean, at Disneyland, my one thing that's like a must do is lunch or dinner at Blue Bayou, because okay, guys, that's inside the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. So that's really cool.
It's really an incredible experience. And, when we went last time, I made sure we did the dinner package with Fantasmic. Because the riverfront gets very full at showtime. And we showed up 15 minutes before the show began and had front row center seats. And it came with a little pad that you could put down and sit on so that you didn't have to sit on the cobblestones. And everybody behind us was standing. We were able to sit down and watch the whole show, and we enjoyed the meal immensely. So yeah, Blue Bayou is absolutely, without a doubt, something you got to do if you're going.
Yeah, that's a really good tip about the package too. Yeah, and so that's a really unique dining option. But if you just take the Magic Kingdom by itself, for instance, in the Magic Kingdom, you have, you can go to the Skipper Canteen, which is themed like the Jungle Cruise. You can have a turkey dinner at the Liberty Tree Inn.
Yeah.
There's all these unique experiences just in that one park. Exactly. Be our guest. It's like you're in the Beast Castle. That's incredible theming in there. Mm-hmm. So, and then you take it to, Epcot is its own whole thing with dining. You can have anything you want in Epcot. In Animal Kingdom, they've got really interesting world flavors themed towards Asia and Africa and India.
Or Pandora.
Yes, or another planet. Right. So there's a lot of really, and then not to mention the hotels. So the hotels in Disney World, especially the deluxe hotels, all are going to have some pretty amazing dining available to you. And then Disney Springs that's really, again, like comparing to Las Vegas, they have these world-class chefs, restaurants in Disney Springs. So, if you like dining, then Disney World is definitely your place, I think.
Absolutely.
So let's see. I know we don't want the show to be like 2 hours long, so let me look at my list here.
We could talk about Fast Pass real quick if you want.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Why don't we talk a little bit about the difference between the Fast Pass systems at Disneyland and Disney World? Do you want to kind of give a quick rundown about that?
Yeah, I was an annual pass holder at Disneyland when they came out with the Fast Pass system there, which was a paper system, and they still kind of have that. But now with the Max Pass, it's very similar to the system that they have in Florida. And so at Disneyland, they have kiosks. You can go put your park ticket in and get a return time on the Fast Pass there. If you don't know what Fast Passes are, you can certainly look at Maven's website and check that stuff out at goinformed.net. I'm sure you have a page for that, right?
Oh, yeah, I have an episode about that, too, back like episode 11 or 12, guys.
Yeah, go check that out and learn what Fast Passes are, but they are very dynamically different at the two different parks. So I got to experience Max Pass for the first time in May, and we bought it for there was three of us, my wife and my daughter and myself, and we bought Max Pass for all 4 days we were there, for all three of us, and it made a world of difference. Being able to be in California Adventure and make Fast Pass reservations for Disneyland was huge. Not having to go across over into the park and get the Fast Pass ticket made a big difference. And I used to be the guy that would bring my friends to Disneyland, and I'd run across the park, get the Fast Passes, come back and meet them as they were exiting whatever ride I made them get in line for. And so I was used to being the runner and happy to do it, but not in my 40s and not on a hot summer day, in California. So, but in Florida, it's a whole strategy, right? There's a whole, you got to get up at 7 in the morning. Or if you're on the West Coast like you are, you got to get up even earlier, right? And you got to make sure that you've got. What I do is I set reminders on my phone and in my Google Calendar to make sure that I don't forget, because I actually forgot on this last trip to get our Fast Passes for our Animal Kingdom Day until the next day, and I paid dearly for it. We actually rode. We went to Animal Kingdom on New Year's Day.
You did?
Without a Fast Pass for Flight of Passage, and we rode it twice. Because we rope dropped it, and then we rode it again at the very, very end of the day, right? And so, but we had Fast Passes. I was fortunate enough to get Fast Passes for Navi River Journey and for the Expedition Everest and for the Kilimanjaro Safaris. But I was very fortunate. If I'd have waited even another day, it probably would have all been gone, and I'd be like, Fast Pass for Nemo, yay. But yeah, there's a lot of stress. If you're in any of the Disney groups, people, they talk about what their strategies are. They talk about the stress of having to get up the next morning and make sure they don't miss that window So yeah, there's a lot to it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes to a general statement too, which is that planning for a trip to Disney World, there's just a lot more planning ahead that you have to do. Your fast passes, if you're staying on site, 60 days out, you're going to be making those reservations. If you're off site, it's 30 days out. Where when you're going to Disneyland, the Max Pass system, you can't even get one until you have scanned into the park. So you have to be in the park. So it's like an even playing field for everybody. They can't get their fast passes in advance. Where on the other hand, knowing that you have those fast passes in advance, like you do with Disney World, is also really helpful because then you have it. Where when you go to Disneyland, you have to kind of hope that you're going to get, because some of them are really tricky to get. There's some popular attractions. So then the other thing too about Max Pass is that it costs money. So the Fast Pass system at Disney World is just free. It's part of your ticket. But at Disneyland, it's $20 per person per day now, Joey. They raised the price.
Oh wow, I didn't know it went up. Yeah, it seemed like a lot at $15 per person per day, but it comes with PhotoPass. So we've really felt that it was worth it just for that. But I won't do Disneyland again without it. And $20 a person per day, it still feels to me like it's an expense, but I'm going to put it in the budget and make sure that we have it because I'm not going to live without it. But I want to touch on one thing you said about the comfort of knowing that 2 months before you're even going to Walt Disney World, you have your fast passes sort of picked. So you can kind of determine when and where you're going to eat and what part of the park you're going to be in for certain parts of the day. It's nice to kind of be able to lay out your plan. Whereas at Disneyland, you really don't know because you kind of don't know what your options are going to be. And I will tell you, as a consummate strategist and as a person who loves going to Disney parks, especially Disneyland, we were there on Memorial Day last year, the week before Galaxy's Edge opened.
That's right.
And I had a strategy. We got in line for Peter Pan, and I was getting my fast pass for Alice in Wonderland, right? We were in line for Alice in Wonderland, about to board. I was grabbing my fast pass for Matterhorn, right? So and I knew because I looked at the park map and I figured out you have to kind of do all this stuff in advance, but you still don't know till day of. And on Memorial Day, I will tell you, we did 90% of the attractions on Memorial Day.
Wow.
Because I'm prepared. If you don't prepare, just be prepared not to do all of it. Just do what you can and have fun with it.
Yeah, and not everything has fast passes at Disneyland, or not necessarily all the time. At Disney World, almost every attraction you can get a fast pass for it. But in Disneyland, like Haunted Mansion, for example, does not always have fast passes. So you're just going to have to wait in the line. So that's a different thing too. So let's see what else. I feel like you guys listening, we are probably raising more questions than we're answering.
Hey, maybe if they ask questions, we can answer them on a Q&A show down the road.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. So you can find us. You can look for Joey. He's the Disney hack. You can look for me as Go Inform Net. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. You guys, I'll post something up when this show goes on too, and ask you to just let us know what your questions are about this, because we're a couple of theme park geeks and we're having fun chatting about this, but I am sure we're glossing over a whole bunch of stuff that you want to know. So let us know what your questions are, because this is fun for us. We're happy to do it again.
Absolutely.
So let's here's another thing. Transportation options. Disney World versus Disneyland.
It's kind of like the conversation about restaurants and size, right? And accommodations. There's almost no comparison. I mean, you really want to stay close enough to Disneyland to be within walking distance. Otherwise, you're taking an Uber or a taxi, or you're renting a car, or you're driving in. Like a lot of people, when we went to Disneyland, we drove in, but we stayed on site, so we didn't have to use the car while we were there. At Disney World, whether you fly in or drive in, you're pretty much going to be using park transportation, which could be a boat, a bus, a monorail, a Skyliner, an Uber, a minivan. I mean, you've got so many options.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you are using the Disney transportation, the Magic Kingdom is so different from Disneyland in terms of how you get there. If you drive to the Magic Kingdom, you're going to be parking across a lake from where the entrance is, and then you still have to take a boat or a monorail to get there.
Right.
And so there's definitely like a buffer around that park, where at Disneyland, this is something I had forgotten, and then last time we were there, I just loved it. The monorail it stops inside the park. So you get on it down in downtown Disney, and you get off right in Tomorrowland, which is really fun.
Yeah.
So that's
It'd be great if they
different.
did that in Florida.
I know. I wish they did that at Epcot.
Yeah, actually inside the park, that would be cool.
Yeah, exactly. So the monorail in Disney World is just going to take you between, there's two of them. One, like a resort loop near Magic Kingdom, and the other one goes between Epcot and Magic Kingdom. But in both cases, the station for it is outside the park. So you're not like riding the monorail and landing right inside the park, which is a really cool thing that you get to do at Disneyland. Okay, so I think we should kind of try to wrap it up here, even though there's 1,000 other things we could talk about. So if you were going to advise somebody about traveling between the two locations, like how long would you suggest that somebody should allow for a trip to Disney World versus a trip to Disneyland?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, it's especially after having just done both parks in the last year. I found that 4 days at Disneyland was actually too much time.
Okay.
I found that by the fourth day we had pretty much hit everything, and it was pretty crowded while we were there. It was Memorial Day week, and we went on Memorial Day, and so it's just it's as much as I love Disneyland, and I could live there. I really felt that after 3 days there, we had really saturated everything. Whereas we just did a week at Walt Disney World over New Year's, and I could have probably spent another week. So I would say probably optimally the option to spend a week in Florida at Disney World is probably best, but spending even at just 4 days, you could probably hit most everything. And then, of course, if you have 10 days to spend, you're not going to want to go to the parks every day. You're going to want to spend some of that time resting and relaxing between days because there's just so much walking.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, to add a little time in there to, just give yourself some downtime if you can.
Yeah. We typically go a couple days and then take a day off. But this last trip, we actually put a buffer day in between every park day. Boy, I can't tell you what a difference that made.
That sounds so luxurious.
Yeah, it's certainly not. It's not for the faint at heart if you're trying to maximize your dollar, because we were spending money just being in Florida and not doing the parks. But I made sure we did resort stuff. We did the resort loop. We went to Wilderness Lodge and did a tour. They have a free guided tour 4 days out of the week. That's led by it's about the history of the resort, but also how it ties into American parks. The national park system.
Uh-huh.
We went to the boardwalk and did a DVC tour. So we did a lot of things that we rode the Skyway gondolas on one of our non-park days. So we did a lot of things that didn't involve being in the parks on those days. We just didn't go as hard as we did on the park days.
Yeah, there's so much to see and do, and every resort is its own destination too. Like you could just go and almost never even go to the parks and still have tons of stuff to see and do. So,
yeah.
I mean, not you or me could ever do that. We would always have to go to the parks. But if you have a family member who's like, I don't want to go, I don't like parks, then they can just hang out at the hotel. There's tons of cool
pools,
stuff to do.
There's golf.
Yeah.
There's Disney Springs. There's lots to do without needing a park ticket. Lots.
Yeah. Where if you're at Disneyland, you're pretty much at Disneyland. There's tons of other stuff to see in that area if you want to get in the car and explore, but not on the Disneyland, resort property. There's not that much.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Half a day at Disney Springs or downtown Disney in California, and you're pretty much done with it.
Yeah, I don't even think. I think that's a good place to go to have a bite to eat or something. But yeah, it's not a destination. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. And do let us know if you have any questions. I'm going to put show notes at goinform.net/50. And you can find some links to what we're talking about there. And definitely look us up on social media and let us know what questions you have. Joey, can you let everybody know where they can find you besides here on my show?
Sure. They could find me under The Disney Hack, just about anywhere. If they go to thedisneyhack.com, they'll find all my social media links there.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me today. And I hope to do it again soon.
Me too. Thanks a lot, Maven.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation, and I do hope we didn't leave you with too many questions, or maybe we did, which is great too. So just join the conversation. Shoot me a message over on Facebook or Instagram. I'll look for that post. I'll put a post up to just ask you what questions you have about the differences between Disney World and Disneyland. And Joey and I will do our best to answer those. And don't forget that we do have another episode that the two of us recorded. It's over on the Disney Hack podcast. So check that one out. And I'll also put a link to that in the show notes. And I hope you guys are all doing great. And I hope that whenever it is, I hope that you have a world-class vacation.